Hi, welcome to day 10. And this is the end of part one, and it is just after midnight on Saturday night, which not normal time for going live on LinkedIn, but anyway, I just finished writing the full recap of part one. So we had a lot of material because it took 10 days, so I had 10 days worth of material to go through today. And trying to just catch up and digest all of the information that we went through and the reference sources that I was looking at from back when things I've read and other things, just trying to put it all together in a form that makes sense. And I hope it does, and I hope that you read it and comment so that we can kind of build a better understanding together of how we want to use design as a problem solving tool moving forward into the other parts of this project, which hopefully will be a lot more engaging. I have a lot of guests lined up for the next part, and hopefully I'll get a few more. So I hope that I'll have one for most days going into the next part of this. And I have a lot of background stuff that I've been working on for the project, including like the map of the ocean space and the stakeholders that are inside the ocean space and how we might want to visualize this going forward, which is kind of fun but also time consuming part of this project. But what I want to do in the recap is to kind of go through it a little bit. The first part of the recap I want to talk about is that design is not necessarily making things beautiful or making art. It can be. And I think that aesthetics is a part of good design. But I think that design has really evolved into a more profound discipline than that. It's a practice used to shape perception, it's used to shape emotion, it's used to shape experiences. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we move forward is what kind of experiences do we want to create for the users and the people in the ocean space and the stakeholders in the ocean space? What kind of work life do we want to create for future generations? What kind of environments do we want to work in? Do we find engaging, and which kind of problems and tasks should we utilize new technology for? Should we utilize AI for? Should we utilize machine learning for? Should we utilize automated programs for? What have you, of the technology that's available now and will become available, that stuff that's kind of on the edge and the cusp of being usable and being innovations. How can we integrate those into the industry in a good way that supports people? So those are the problems we want to look at. So I want to reiterate that design is more than the aesthetics. It's a practice. And I think that's really kind of an important concept after we go through week one, or like to the first part of this project. And then I think that there's so many great books out there on design and design thinking and this transformation from design as it was in the 50s and 60s and design as it is now in 2023. Moving on. Watch the interview with Paul Holter. I linked to it also again in the article on LinkedIn, the full rundown. So you can find it there. You can also find it on my website. It's really interesting always talking to him, but I think having that shift between the engineering mindset to a more exploring mindset, the kind of design thinking mindset, where you don't necessarily take the problem statement at face value, you explore the problem and you explore the stakeholder needs. And then from that exploration, you reframe the problem. That can happen many, many times before you get to an end solution. And then I think it's important to point out that at the very end of the article, I had the quote about the expansion of time, Parkinson's law, that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. And design practices are often that way because you can continue to go through the cycles of improvement, and exploring and improving and exploring and improving. But at some point, you have to call it done and good enough. And this project has a framework like that. We have 100 days to go through this. It will end at the beginning of June before North shipping, because I cannot continue to do this every single day on top of all the other things that I do. It's a practice for me to do this, and it's kind of a new thing for me. I haven't gone live on any of my platforms before this past 10 days. Although I've spent a lot of time on Teams and a lot of time in this room in my home office, although I do go to the regular office more often these days. But next part of the recap, I want to talk about the value of design, because I think that it's really undervalued, especially in the ocean industries. There are not enough companies and product people that spend time observing users and observing the customers, because customers and the users are not also often the same thing in the kind of industrial side of work. They're the same person in the consumer side, but in the industrial B2B side, it can be completely decoupled. And then a lot of the product development is focused on the customer and the customer's needs. But the user has to deal with it every day. And eventually the user also becomes that customer and that buyer as they progress in their career. And they're not going to forget the stuff they hated to use. And I think that there's a long tail here of design. And then there's also the study that came out of McKinsey that you can have a lot higher revenue growth if you have good design practice as part of your business and part of your strategy. And I think that that's tremendously undervalued in our industry. I think we have so much more to do to reach a level of design maturity that would enable us to become really human-centered and to reduce accidents. Every day I see accidents blamed on operators. They say, oh, well, it's human error, it's human error, it's human error. And I think that so much of that can actually be solved through design, because it's not necessarily just human error or process error. It can also be, not spending time in designing out the possibility for that mistake to be made, because people are human, and in design practices, we have to think about what errors will people make. So there's that we need to keep in mind going forward. What else do we need to think about? I wanted to point out also things about innovation, because if we can catalyze the industry through a project like this, where we think about the design practices and the stakeholders and how everything's interrelated and how different companies' models will affect other companies' models and so forth in the ocean space. And if we want to really achieve these big goals like the Sustainable Development Goals, or to do great ESG reporting and compliance, then we must view our business objectives from a long-term perspective, and we must view our outcomes more as outcomes that are created by a cluster of companies together, and not just our own internal operations. because we'll never reach a mutually beneficial resolution without looking at the potential trade-offs for all of the stakeholders and parties across. So that's what I want to talk about today, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. I hear a small person waking up, so I'm going to go. Bye.